Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. I just need to let everybody on social media know that the live stream is getting ready to start. Okay, with all of the people on social media now knowing that the live stream is on the air, I'm going to get right into tonight's topic. Now, tonight's topic was brought to me by one of my viewers who was telling me that Black Adam, the new DC Comics superhero movie, is a flop at the box office. And they wanted me to make a video on the subject of Black Adam being a flop at the box office, and it's sad to hear about Black Adam not performing as well as most people, including myself, anticipated it would. Now, your Black Adam had all the elements for success, with an A-list star like Dwayne The Rock Johnson being the lead for the movie, playing the role of Black Adam, and the movie focusing around Black Adam taking on the Justice Society of America. Unfortunately, in spite of the movie doing extremely well at the box office, opening up at $67 million in October, unfortunately, that just wasn't enough for the movie to perform well enough to pull a profit for your Discovery Warner Brothers. Now, what's really interesting here about Black Adam is based on what I saw from the scenes that were presented, it looked like a very faithful adaptation of the source material of the Justice Society of America comics from the mid 2000s. Because back in the mid 2000s, that's when Black Adam went from being a major league villain to being what I call a tweener or an anti-hero. And he was getting over with a lot of comic fans in that tweener role as a anti-hero. So like Hulk and Wolverine over at Marvel, Black Adam was turning into this anti-hero who was basically doing a lot of bad stuff for good reasons. Now, this all the elements I saw in the trailers and the clips look very promising. Unfortunately, in spite of all of the box office success as related to the opening weekend, Black Adam just isn't going to be able to pull a profit. And it's not going to be able to pull a profit based on the numbers as related to movies, because when it comes down to movies, a film has to go out here and make 3 times its original budget. And maybe that's where they made a mistake with your Black Adam, which they said had a budget of $195 to $230 million. And with a budget that big, the film basically was never going to pull a profit. And it basically proves a point that I had been making in many other live streams about how many of these superhero movies were out here going to cost more than they could possibly make. Now, when I look at Black Adam, it's making the same mistake that I saw back as when I was studying the history of movies and the decline of studios like MGM in the late 60s and Disney in the 70s. Now, your MGM back in the 60s wasn't able to adapt to a changing marketplace, and many other movie studios, they weren't able to adapt to a changing marketplace. And as the Vietnam War was raging on, they were still out here producing these epic movies like these musicals, these war movies, and these historical films or these adaptations of great literary novels. And these films cost a lot of money, but sadly, they weren't returning on income because the problem was the audience was changing. And as that baby boomer audience, which was experiencing the Vietnam War, they were not interested in seeing what people called their father's movies. And they didn't want to see their father's movies because they weren't a part of World War II. They weren't interested in literature from the classics from the 19th century. And they were not interested in going out here and watching a musical where people are singing and dancing when they're hearing about their friends being blown up in the killing fields of Vietnam. That's something people weren't interested in seeing. And Hollywood at the time was detached and disconnected from its audience to the point where they weren't hearing them. And that's something I see as a bit of a parallel as related to today's modern superhero movie, because all Hollywood makes these days are these superhero movies, and these superhero movies, they have extremely large budgets, and their stories that just aren't compelling to audiences, which I believe basically have become burnt out as related to the entire superhero movie genre. Now, the superhero movie genre has come and gone ever since the 1970s with 1978's Superman the movie and 1989's Batman the movie. And we thought it was basically over with the superhero movies in 1997 with the flop Batman and Robin. However, the movie Blade basically revived the entire superhero movie genre. And when Blade came out, it showed us that there was still life in the superhero movie genre. And that was further reinforced with your 2002 Spider-Man by Sam Raimi, which took all the momentum from Blade. And then that built into the momentum with some mediocre movies like Hulk and Elektra and Daredevil, and the cat and flops like Catwoman. And then we got the Nolan Batman movies and Iron Man, and that basically brought brand new life into the superhero movie genre. But over the last, I say, 10 to 15 years, we have seen a lot of superhero movies and superhero TV shows on Netflix and Disney Plus. And with so much content right now, I'm believing that the audience they just have seen so much that they've basically become burnt out on superheroes. And as the market has become saturated with so many characters, the Hollywood is having a problem. And that problem, I believe, is answering the critical question, why should we care? Now, as a screenwriter, I have to answer three critical questions, and that are, who is the main character? What do they want? And most importantly, why should we care? Now, back in 2008, you really had a reason to care about Iron Man when he came to the theaters, because Iron Man basically was a revolutionary film. in that it picked up on the momentum of 2002's Spider-Man and revitalized a genre that was really faltering as related to Spider-Man 3 performing very poorly. And Iron Man basically opened the door for what we call the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe basically showed Hollywood that there was a market for superhero movies, and you could go out here and build on the momentum of each movie to build a larger storyline. And as they built the larger storyline, the box office just kept growing and growing. And I believe that the Marvel Cinematic Universe basically peaked with Black Panther. And after it peaked with Black Panther, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe went into a decline. And that decline, it creatively, is what we're seeing as related to the box office decline, because as I see it, this basically creators are getting burnt out on superheroes, and it's hard to really tell a unique story in the whole superhero movie genre, because many of these movies, the big problem I'm seeing with a lot of them is that a lot of these movies, they're not distinct and original like they were in 2008 to about 2018 or 2019. They are becoming cookie cutter, and they're basically coming like across like they're coming off an assembly line, like Chevrolet Novas on a GM at the GM plant. And that's the way many of these superhero movies feel. I mean, and it's hard to come out and make a movie that feels distinct, because many of the films, they just feel like they're just so cookie cutter and so formulaic, and it just doesn't answer that question of why should we care and get people excited and get them excited enough to go out here and want to continue spending money at the theater. That is a problem that I've seen as related to this year, as related to superhero movies. I mean, a lot of these movies have underperformed, and they've underperformed because I believe that people are just burnt out from watching so many of these movies, and that none of these movies really are coming across as special. Now, when I looked at your Black Adam in the trailer, it was a very exciting trailer. Again, it felt like a comic book. Unfortunately, one of the problems I saw with the movie was it felt like it was cut and paste. And the cut and paste feel of many of today's superhero movies, not just Black Adam, but many of the MCU movies as well. That's one of the things that's leading to why so many of these movies are underperforming. And when I look at the bigger picture as related to superhero movies, I really do believe that we are in a place where there's superhero movie fatigue. Because again, when I look at Black Adam, everything looked pretty solid as related to the trailer. And even though there were a lot of cut and paste scenes, the story was just like the comic. You had all the elements for success. And when I look at this movie, I just really look at it and go, there was nothing really special about it. And that's a big problem I saw with Black Adam. And it really wasn't it wasn't a movie that would make me go, hey, I really want to go out and see this, like Transformers Rise of the Beast, which looks absolutely fantastic. I mean, the visuals there, I mean, are amazing, and the Transformers look great. But when I look at many of your superhero movies like Black Adam, I'm not seeing anything unique and special. And again, that's just a sign to me that there is a creative fatigue as related to these movies. And that creative fatigue, again, is something that I saw with many late 60s movies as related to musicals and epic movies and these movies based on classic literature. It was just, you've done something so much that it's just not special. You're going through the motions. And that's the way Black Adam kind of felt. And that's possibly why it didn't really perform very well. But I really believe that there are a lot of serious problems in Hollywood, which I believe has overinvested in superhero movies the same way Hollywood in the 60s overinvested in all of the musicals, epic movies, and all of these other war films, the audience basically was just tired of those genres. The audience tastes have changed. And that basically was shown to me with the performance of Top Gun Maverick, that audiences basically wanted to see something different. And they wanted to see Top Gun Maverick in large numbers, but they really weren't as excited as they were for superhero movies. And I saw this coming maybe 2, 3 years ago when I looked at the way some of these superhero movies were struggling as related to Marvel's Phase 4. And I saw that you needed to go out here and start making some different kind of movies because the audience, they really, audiences want diversity. They want different ideas and they want to see different types of stories. And and the whole thing is that many of these superhero movies, they're just not special anymore because when you can see a superhero movie every 3 months, there's nothing really there that makes the audience appreciate them because the audience just takes these types of movies for granted as they're continuously being made because you're making so much content that the viewer just they get fatigued. And because I know myself, and I'm a lifelong comic fan who has all these Marvel Legends action figures, thousands of comics. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I want to see something different. And again, I love comics and superheroes, but there's got to be some kind of moderation. Unfortunately, Hollywood doesn't know how to moderate when they're out here making money because once they go out here and they see something successful, their whole approach to business isn't to keep making it special. No, their approach is to try to rush out as much product as possible. And as they're rushing out so much product, they basically saturate the market with so much product that the audience just doesn't really care about it. I mean, I saw the same thing happen back in the 80s with the horror movies. I mean, I used to watch a lot of 80s horror. And in the 80s, we not only had Jason and Freddy, we had a lot of other small budget horror movies. And as they saturated the market with horror movies, the entire genre became boring. And by about 92, 93, people stopped caring about horror movies because they had saturated the market with so many of these movies that the audience just burnt out on them. And again, this is something Hollywood does because once they see one movie doing well, the whole thing is you get guys wanting to make a bunch of copycats. But in our post telecommunications of 1996 world, we have studios that are conglomerated and consolidated. And as they're consolidated and conglomerated, what we're seeing at the movies is they go out here and again pump these movies out like an assembly line. And that's what I'm seeing right now as related to the poor performance of Black Adam on the books is that there's a problem not with the movie. There's a problem in that the studio executives are not really connecting with the audience because again, Black Adam had all the elements of success and it did open strong, but it could not maintain that success because it just was one of those movies that cost too much. And that was a mistake that Hollywood executives made back in the 60s in that they were making films that cost too much because their whole goal back in the 60s was they needed to make movies that cost a lot of money in order to be able to justify the big budgets and the big salaries of those stars. Unfortunately, as these budgets continued to grow, what happened was they weren't growing in proportion to the profits that they needed to make. And over the last 15, 20 years, Hollywood really needs to go out here and get money from the foreign market to sustain itself. And these budgets that continue to get bigger and bigger with each passing movie, because these days your Black Adam was costing, again, 190 to 230 million dollars. And when you do the math on your Black Adam, in order for your Black Adam to pull a profit at 190 million dollars, you multiply that by 3, because you have to make both your not only your production budget, but you have to make your advertising budget, and you have to make your production budget 2-3 times over to pull to just break, not pull a profit, but break even. And this movie would have had to have made $570 million at the low. And if they said it cost $230 million, so 230 times 3, that's movie's going to have to make $690 million in order to just break even. And again, that's really hard for a movie to do, and it becomes a big gamble when you try to take this movie into the overseas markets, because the overseas markets may or may not support this movie, and your US has been relying too much on foreign markets to carry movies, and they've been relying also too much on these big budget blockbusters. And that was the same mistake that Hollywood made back in the 60s that almost led to Hollywood going out of business. And the superhero movie is basically in the same place that the epic movie and the musical and the war movie were in the 60s, in that the movies are costing more than they can possibly make. And there's no way that the studio could pull a profit on a movie that cost anywhere from $300 to $200 million. I mean, there's no way a studio can make a profit on this kind of movie when you're making them practically every month or so, because the audience just doesn't have that money. Yeah, they have that money for one special movie. Maybe once a year, you'll see people go see a movie like a Wonder Woman or an Aquaman, maybe once or twice a year like that. Or they'll go see an MCU movie maybe once or twice a year like that. I mean, outside of the diehard comic fans like myself, there aren't a lot of people looking to spend that kind of money at all. I mean, you have to understand, you didn't have that audience even when in the old days when we only had 3 channels. And these days when you have people who have dozens of options, including YouTube and streaming, they don't really want to go out here and spend that kind of money. And that's something many detached executives don't understand. They don't understand that you cannot go out here and expect people to go out here and keep spending $15 when you give them an option that they can go out here and watch Black Adam on streaming. And they say it's coming to streaming on December 16th. So a lot of people who possibly would have went to the movies, they're going to wait for the movie to come to streaming. And sadly, the studios, they gave people an option and they chose not to watch their movie because it's cheaper to go to streaming. And it's cheaper to go to streaming because you not only get to see that movie, you get to see other movies and you get to see other TV shows when you go out here and you watch the streaming service. So that's where your Black Adam wound up losing also as well. And this is something, again, that I see as a sign of the times as related to your Black Adam's box office. I mean, a lot of people, they're scratching their head wondering why your Black Adam didn't do well, even though it was a good movie as related to many comic fans. But the problem was that it's a lot of Hollywood business issues that led to the whole Black Adam not performing very well. And again, when I look at the big picture of Hollywood, I'm really seeing signs of superhero movie fatigue. And I know that there are people who will say, oh, the COVID-19 pandemic has people staying away from the theaters, but why did they go out this summer to go watch Top Gun Maverick? There's the critical question I really want to ask as related to your Hollywood, because people came out in large numbers for Top Gun Maverick, and they came out ready to go see this movie. Some came for nostalgia. Some other people came because they wanted to see what their parents were talking about. But as I see it, this was a fresh breath of fresh air after seeing superhero movies basically dominating the theaters. And when you've seen all these superhero movies, you want to see something different. And I have been saying for years that Hollywood should have been investing in some new movies, and they should have been looking to focus on developing some projects with some smaller budgets, because what turned Hollywood around in the 70s and the 80s was a heavy focus on small budget movies, and it was the small budget movies that went on to become classics and blockbusters like The Godfather. Now, The Godfather only cost $1 million to make, but made over $200 million. So the studio basically made most of its money in the first 2 or 3 weeks as related to The Godfather. And with many other films, they were focused on small budget films. And as they focused on the small budgets, the films, these became the future blockbusters, and they became the future classics. And that's where I think your guys like your David Zaslav really need to start focusing more money on focusing on those smaller budget movies made by new and indie directors. And that's where you're going to get most of your money, because what I see is the same fatigue that I saw again within the 60s. I saw it with horror movies in the late 80s and early 90s, and I saw it with action movies in 1990, because in 1990 I remember when they had RoboCop 2, they had Dick Tracy and Total Recall, and they expected all three of those films to be blockbusters, but most people stayed home because, again, they were burnt out. And again, I remember RoboCop 2, it wasn't really that great of a movie. Total Recall was fantastic, and it was a great Arnold Schwarzenegger action pick, but your Total Recall underperformed, and it underperformed because the audience was burnt out on action movies. They were pretty much tired of seeing them after seeing them practically every year for the last 10 years or so, with movies like Rambo, The Running Man, Predator, well, I forget the name of the Commando. I mean, there were so many action movies. Then you had smaller movies like American Ninja and other movies out there like Firewalker and Indiana Jones. People were just burnt out on all of the action movies, and Hollywood had a disappointing 1990. And the two movies that were big hits in 1990 were Pretty Woman, a $3 million movie that Disney basically threw in the garbage and didn't expect to do well. And the other movie that did well was Ghost, with Demi Moore, Patrick Swayze, and Whoopi Goldberg. And the audience basically was out here watching your Pretty Woman and your Ghost. And they were also watching other movies that were out here, small budget movies. And it was those small budget movies that saved Hollywood's summer of 1990. And I remember I was in high school, and again, everybody was like, oh, expecting this RoboCop and Dick Tracy and Total Recall to do well. But the problem was the audience had just had enough of the action movies. They were just tired of them. And the audience, they just said, I've seen this movie 100 times. It's time to do something different. And when Ghost and Pretty Woman came along, it was the different that people wanted that allowed them to get that breath of fresh air, allowed them to just be able to escape for a while and not see the same story over and over again. That was what people wanted back then, because I remember all three of those movies, Dick Tracy, RoboCop 2, Total Recall. I mean, these were supposed to be huge hits. Unfortunately, RoboCop 2, it was not as good as the first RoboCop. It was a major disappointment. I remember seeing it in the theater and going, Frank Miller messed that story up. Total Recall, again, was a very good movie, but just did not catch on. And then there was Dick Tracy, which had beautiful visuals, but sadly, just it didn't get the audience because, again, you had guys who were they were burnt out on these movies. And the same thing I'm believing is happening now, because if you can see something every week, it just isn't special. When you can see something all the time, it's not unique. When you can see the same stories and the same setups and it starts to bore the audience. And what makes it even worse, yeah, JX, I remember Rocketeer. Rocketeer, that was sad because that was a very good movie, but again, all underperformed. I mean, Rocketeer had fantastic visuals and a great story, but wound up struggling at the box office because the audience wanted a breather. And I believe that right now, the audience wants a breather as related to these superhero movies. And that's something that anybody who knows the business would be making a plan for. I mean, I even make a plan for it in many of my own books. Like this year, I did ISIS Legacy because I said, after doing two intense stories like ISIS the Main Event and ISIS Revenge of the Cyber Goddess, I needed to give the audience a bit of a breather by doing a lighter, more, slice of life story. And the slice of life story was to give the audience a minute to get a break so that they could go out here and get ready for the next storyline and the next story arc. And that's what people, I believe, really want these days. They want a breather as related to things because you've had to deal with this COVID pandemic. You've had to deal with all of these intense action movies. And a lot of people, they don't want intensity. They want a breather. And it's time to give people a minute to, catch their breath, take a minute and, get their faculties. And that's what a lot of comic writers and writers like myself do. What we do is we try to put that breather in there with a slice of life story so that the viewer can go out here and have that break. Now, you can get ISIS Legacy on Amazon.com right now in paperback and Kindle format. And it's a great, fun story, and I think you'll enjoy it. But that's what I think that the studios need to do. And I know your David Zaslav is making some plans as related to rebuilding the DC universe as related to the films. But right now, David Zaslav, I would recommend that while you've got plans for superhero movies, give the audience a bit of a break. Take a little bit of a minute to go and take care of things and let them get it that second. Hey, Gboot2786, I'm glad to see you here. I do a show with Gboot2786 every Thursday. Sadly, I couldn't do it this Thursday because he had something to do, and I had the John Haynes Illuminati story to work on. So if you want to check me out on his channel, you can sub to his channel, Gboot2786, and you can go out here and catch me over there on Thursdays. Oh, what do I'm not leaving until about 12:15, Gboot786. I'm not disappointed about the Batman Beyond movie being canceled, Gboot2786, but I understand why David Zaslav did that because he wants to build a new continuity with the DC universe. I also understand why your James Gunn went out here and just tried to shut down Patty Jenkins' crazy ideas for Wonder Woman 3. I mean, what they're trying to do is get your DC cinematic universe together, and that's what he's trying to do right now. So hold on one second. We got 33 in the chat and 19 likes. Let's get the likes up. Thank you, Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare. Glad that you're helping get the likes up. We really need to get those likes up because that helps with the YouTube algorithm. I mean, let's get this channel on the level of a Kevin Samuels or one of these other channels out here. But the whole thing is that he's trying to regroup as related to the DC cinematic universe, which has been in a bit of a shambles, and canceling the Batman Beyond movie. I'm a big Batman Beyond fan. I love that show. I love a lot of the concepts of this show. Batman Beyond helped inspire a lot of things as related to Isis's character, and that I was writing about gods in the future, and I got that idea from watching Batman Beyond, and the whole Nubian sword Ankh is inspired from Batman Beyond. But I look at this as I'd rather see no Batman Beyond movie than a poor quality one. And when I look at your Batman Beyond, it's a great concept, but you need to have a really good story. And if you're going to rush out a movie, it's not going to fit into the universe organically. So I see what David Zaslav and I see what James Gunn is trying to do, and he had to cancel that movie just like he canceled Batgirl and canceling Wonder Woman 3. That's something that again had to happen because a lot of these projects they weren't up to par. And with your Warner Brothers already struggling, making these movies and having them have these astronomical budgets, that could put Warner Brothers, as related to the Discovery merger, in the same place MGM was back in the late 60s. And again, I believe that they really do need to start focusing on some smaller budget content, get those profits up as related to small budget content. That's something that Michael Eisner did because, Michael Eisner back in the 80s, he saw Disney was struggling. And as he was regrouping to rebuild their animated division, he made a lot of small budget movies in order to bluster the profits and get that box office because a couple of $2 million movies that go out here and make $30-40 million, that allows you to have profits to go out here and invest in other projects. That's one of the approaches he used because he would go out here and get these, second tier actors and turn them into stars. So that's something that he did that I believe that David Zaslav needs to do because you're not going to be able to pull money on movies like The Flash, which is already tarnished by Ezra Miller's poor, bad behavior, and just this glut of superhero movies. I believe it's time to really, like JX was making the point, yeah, only 2 movies a year, that's what studios need to pull, and they really need to really pare down the budgets as they're making these movies, not to Superman 4 levels, but to a reasonable level, because right now these movies are costing too much, and it takes them a longer time to pull a profit. I mean, when you have a movie like Black Adam, where they spent $190 to $230 million, according to some estimates, I believe that's way too much money, and it's way too much money to spend on an obscure character that most people outside of diehard comic fans like myself don't know about. Because when you're a diehard comic fan, yes, you know who Shazam's arch enemies are, like Black Adam, Mr. Mind, and Dr. Sivana. Yeah, a diehard comic fan like myself who is familiar with the DC universe, we know who those characters are. But with Black Adam, the anti-hero character, I mean, that anti-hero version was only around maybe 2006, 2007. So nobody really knew this version of Black Adam outside of diehard comic fans. And I knew that it was true to the source material of those books in Justice Society of America. Unfortunately, the average American or people overseas, they didn't know this character, and they didn't have enough reason to care about them like they did Black Panther. Now, Black Panther, people knew who this character was. He had a following for decades, and that's why he became a blockbuster, because people basically knew that character, and that answered the critical question of why should we care? I mean, Black comic fans cared because they wanted to see another Black hero on screen. They wanted to see Chadwick Boseman, who basically defined the role of the Black Panther, and they wanted to go out here and they wanted to see Black fantasy grow and expand. So those were reasons people wanted to go see Black Panther. Sadly, Black Adam didn't have much of those reasons. I mean, you had Dwayne Johnson, who is a very charismatic guy, but the character isn't one that everybody knows, and most people, they don't know the anti-hero version, and that really hindered this film's ability to really perform well at the box office. Good point, Juwan Buchanan. Yeah, there's a lot of quantity over quality, and they don't really understand that you need to make less movies to make them special. I mean, that's one of the things that led to a lot of these movies struggling these days. I mean, if you've got Disney Plus shows every 3 to 4 months, you've got another superhero movies coming out practically every 2 months or so. It's hard to care. And again, the audience right now, as I see it, is completely burnt out. I mean, they're just tired at this point. And again, as somebody who has written a lot of action stories, I can tell you that as a writer of action stories, I know that sometimes you gotta cool it down after two or three intense storylines. You gotta give the audience a break. You gotta let them breathe because they're just seeing so much intense action that it just basically start to get the 1,000 yard stare and you become completely indifferent to it. And people right now, they're becoming indifferent to superhero movies, and that's a problem that I believe the studios really need to focus on. Yes, there a lot of these movies are filled with social justice and identity politics, and that's sucking the life out of many of these movies. That's a key problem as related to many of the Marvel Studios films. But I really see another problem, and again, it's exhausting at this point. I mean, people are exhausted at this point as related to a lot of these superhero movies. And again, I'm a longtime comic fan, and I'm exhausted by a lot of them. And what makes it even more frustrating is they put all of this social justice in these movies. And I started to see that with Spider-Man Homecoming, which is a movie that aggravated me because we didn't get the real Spider-Man like we got in the Raimi movies. No, we got some sort of soy-filled beta male web slinger, and his movies were really lame. And it was just one of those things, along with all the feminism they were pushing in these MCU movies, that made them aggravating to watch because I just want to see good guys take on the bad guys. I want to see some buildup as related to organic storytelling. I want to see some action and adventure. That's what I wanted from these superhero movies. But sadly, we have people like your Bob Iger running Disney and running it into the ground. He's sitting there making these superhero movies and trying to put messages of identity politics into these films. But people don't go to these movies for identity politics. No, we go for an escape. We go to get away from problems. And here we have your Bob Iger going out here and the people who are running Disney, like Kevin Feige, giving us problems. I mean, that's what made shows like She-Hulk Attorney at Law grading, how they just kept pushing the feminism instead of trying to sell you a laugh. I mean, when I looked at the She-Hulk show, it really reminded me of what I was doing with the E-Steam series. And with the E-Steam series, I had a career woman, the devilish diva out here taking on bad guys, and you getting a laugh here and there as she was having adventures. And it was sad because I knew how to put that show together and make it work right. And sadly, your Marvel Studios again took it for granted and took their audience for granted and made a horrible program. And again, what I'm seeing again with these superhero movies is that people, again, they making stuff that just they take it for granted because they're taking the audience for granted. They think all we want to see is superhero movies, but I want to see some other stuff out here. I want to see some other types of stories. I mean, give me something fresh and different. That's what Blade was in 1998. I mean, yeah, we had superhero movies, but what I liked about Blade was Wesley redefined that character. He put his own take on the character, and he gave us something fresh and different as related to vampires. Now, we had vampire shows like Buffy on at the time, and we had a lot of other vampire movies like Interview with the Vampire out there. But Blade gave us something unique and distinct. And again, he was putting his own visuals on it. And that's what made Blade just an absolutely fantastic movie. I mean, when you look at Blade, and I managed to look at Blade on HBO Max a while back, and it's a great movie that ages very well. But the movie was again just great because he took risks. He did something different. He did something unique, and we're not getting that with today's superhero movies. And they come across again like an assembly line. They feel like again a Chevy Citation or a Buick Century. They're just coming off the assembly line, and they've got a few things different here and there, but it's not something that says, hey, make me go out here and buy this. And that's a problem that's related to the studios right now with superhero movies. I mean, yes, we occasionally get a good show like a Peacemaker, or occasionally get a a movie that looks like it's fun like Black Adam, but there's nothing consistent about it. And again, there's nothing consistent because we're not getting unique ideas. We're getting a lot of people who are under pressure to try to rush stuff out. And that's one of the worst things you could ever do when you're a creator, is try to rush stuff out. I mean, I've been there myself. When I remember when I first started the ISIS series in 2012, I wanted to produce 4 books a year, and I was rushing stories. And I remember around the time I wrote My Sister, My Frenemy, and Death of a Theta, I realized that I was making a mess because I was there were typos in books. A lot of the stories really were not coming together the way that they should. And that's when I said I had to stop. And I believe a lot of the studios really need to stop right now, cool it down, and just take your time and do it right. Ray Hanna, I really do appreciate the masculinity in Black Adam. That, again, I have no problem with the source material. I have no problem with the character of Black Adam and how strong he was. But the problem is the audience. They weren't excited about this movie to go out and see it in force, and that's a major problem for the studios. They don't understand the big picture as related to superhero movies and the superhero movie genre. I believe that, again, people are just bored with these movies. They're bored with them because they don't feel special. They don't feel unique. They don't have that pop. I mean, I look at the special effects and they're very uninspired. I look at the characterizations and story and they're really flat. I look at the action and the sequences just feel like they're cookie cutter. I mean, this is both Warner Brothers and Disney. The films just feel like a GM assembly line, and it's just boring overall. I mean, same pattern I saw back in 1990 with the action movies, same pattern I saw in 91, 92 with the horror movies. You make so much of the same type of material over time, and the audience is just going to say, I take this content for granted because there's nothing there that makes me care. I mean, that's how 1990 Ghost and Pretty Woman became the #1 movie. And after Hollywood realized the mistakes they were making, I mean, James Cameron was able to regroup and come back with Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And Terminator 2 Judgment Day was a masterpiece of a film. Even though that film is almost getting on 30, 35 years old at this point, it is still stronger than many MCU movies as related to special effects. And that's because James Cameron took a minute to really think about what he wanted to put on screen. And when he took a minute to take a look at what he put on screen, he put together something special with Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And that basically revived the entire action movie genre and managed to help Hollywood regroup on its footing. However, as they were regrouping on their footing, again, they were focusing on smaller budget movies, which became 90s classics. And as they were focusing on those movies like a Clueless and many of these other movies, they went on to become classics. And I believe, again, Hollywood has a problem in that they're putting all their eggs in one basket like they did back in the 60s and tried to do back towards the late 80s. You've got to get all these eggs out of this basket and superhero basket, because you're really, the audience is just, they want something different. They want something unique. They want something special. They want to go out here and see something, that they've never seen before. I mean, that's possibly one of the other reasons why Black Panther was so successful, because it was the first Black fantasy movie. And that was something people wanted to see. And again, we want to see Marvel and DC superheroes, but I believe that it's time to regroup and get out of the Snyderverse and start focusing on doing something fresh and different, doing something that really stays true to the spirit of DC characters. I mean, go and focus on trying to make the characters more hopeful, make the characters more optimistic. I mean, you have a perfect casting of your Henry Cavill as Superman and your Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I mean, you've got the actors. Now you just need to focus on the stories and stop rushing out multiple versions of characters. I believe it's time for your DC to really regroup and just make some unique, distinct standalone movies and slowly build towards a DC cinematic universe. It doesn't have to mean an immediate connection to each movie. So I really want to see something as related to DC regrouping because Black Adam was a step in the right direction. I mean, cinematically, it was a solid movie. Looking from the trailers, I'm hoping on December 16th to get a look at the movie overall, even though it's got some cut and paste special effects. I'm hoping to get a look at the movie and really get a real critical look at it. I'm going to make a video review because I've got HBO Max this month, and that was one of the reasons why I got HBO Max this month was because I wanted to review this movie. And again, it's a sign, as I see it, when you have movies underperforming, as for my over 20 plus years of experience, it's a sign that, hey, maybe the genre is running out of gas. Maybe people are just getting tired of this kind of material. Maybe the audience just wants a break. And maybe Hollywood needs to stop worrying about making billions at the box office and touting those numbers and start focusing on smaller budget movies that cost a couple of million and start focusing on making those kind of movies. Leave the identity politics at the door. Focus on the character development. Focus on the story. I mean, that's what I do when I'm writing novels like The Temptation of John Haynes or Eternal Night. I'm not focused on, I'm trying to make these characters out here be representing an entire community. Like some of these guys, they want their characters to represent all Black people. No, I understand that there's a diversity in the Black community. And with there being diversity, we're going to see diversity of thought, diversity of cultures, diversities of ways of life. And it's time to see some different ways of life, like what I was doing with Spinsterella, showing you Black Goths, the Thetas showing you a Black sorority. Other books that I've done, like the Isis series, showing you a goddess next door, an Egyptian and Nubian goddess who are Black. I mean, I want to show you different parts of things. And again, it's that diversity of thought that makes people care because they get to see something different and unique. And that's what gives people incentive to go out here and go see movies. I mean, the problem what I'm seeing with the superhero movies is that, again, they just feel cookie cutter. There's nothing special about them. And again, you can't keep making the same movie and expecting the same success because there's a concept called diminishing returns. Because as you introduce one concept, eventually the audience gets tired of that concept when you constantly are repeating that concept, because what made one story special is not going to make it special when you see the same story 3, 4, 5 times over. When you start seeing the same story 3, 4, 5 times over, what's going on, Omio? Glad to see you here. But the problem is that people need that break. And again, I believe what David Zaslav needs to do is just go out here. I think he should have canceled The Flash. I would have just eaten that $200 million because that movie, as I see it, your Ezra Miller is a liability. And I believe the only thing he can do with that movie is just scrap that movie, move it over to HBO Max and move on, and then start focusing on rebuilding a new DC universe on screen with a new Henry Cavill movie, a new Wonder Woman movie with Gal Gadot, a Batman movie, possibly with your Robert Pattinson or your Ben Affleck, and get a new actor for The Flash, a new actor for Green Lantern, and possibly, if you can, get Stephen Amell to come back for Green Arrow and build from there and say that we're building a new DC universe and we're going to build this new DC universe and we're going to do it nice and slow, maybe 1, maybe 2 movies a year, allow people to get that breathing and start making some films in some other types of genres. Let's have some comedies because we really do need a comedy. in the aftermath of this pandemic, people really need to laugh. And I believe it's time to make a comedy. I mean, that's one of the things I've been pondering as related to things, because I had this concept for something called Dude, Where's the Bathroom? And we people want to get a laugh for a minute. They want to escape and get away from their problems. And your Hollywood has to get off of all of this social justice and identity politics, because people just went through a pandemic. They went through losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, having their livelihoods threatened by jab mandates, and just a whole lot of political quagmire. And what people want is a break from their problems. And I believe that it's time for a comedy right now. I mean, if there's one thing we need right now, is a comedy. We need to get people laughing. Because I remember this last Saturday night, I was watching Bad Teacher, which is a Cameron Diaz movie on HBO Max. And even though the movie wasn't that great, I just enjoyed the minute that I could just laugh at something. And we need more comedies right now. I mean, if there's something that would be a blockbuster as I see it, it's a comedy. I mean, right now, one of the things I see being a big success for any studio that invests in it is a comedy. And I believe a comedy would practically blow away all these superhero movies and their lame attempts at comedy. That's another thing that really irks me, is that your Marvel Studios in their movies, they just try so hard to do comedy. No, you don't have to try to do comedy. You just go out here and you do comedy. So that's something I believe would be big. I believe romances would be big, because, people, they want to see two people coming together and enjoying their lives. And they want to see that there's possibly love still in the world. These are things that I believe people want as related to movies, but they're not getting, because what the studios fear is, oh, dramas don't perform, romantic comedies don't perform, comedies don't perform. Maybe it's the fact that you're writing garbage, and it's time to just go out here and shift things up and change up the game as I see it. I mean, I believe it's time to, really just shift the gears, because it's like I see, literature and art like a 5-speed manual. You have to know when to shift the gears, and you have to know when to, shift those gears and move the things forward. Because when you're driving a manual transmission, you have to shift the gears and you have to get control as related to things. Because with the gear, you get control over the gears, and you can just instinctively know, okay, this is time for me to go from first to second, second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth. I mean, this is what driving a 5-speed manual is like. And this is what people don't understand as related to, film. It's like, you've got a lot of executives here. They want to stay in automatic mode, like with the automatic transmission. And what they want to do is keep making the same movies, not understanding your audience is growing older. And your audience that's coming behind them, they don't want to see dad's characters or dad's stories. And they don't want to see the same stories over and over. They want fresh takes. They want fresh characterizations. I mean, this is one of the things that when I look at comic art these days, I'm looking for fresh and unique visuals. That's one of the reasons why I chose Antonio Balderi to do the John Haynes book, because he had just an awesome style that really popped. I mean, that's what I'm looking for. And again, when you're going out to go to the movies, you're looking for something fresh and unique. And again, I'm not seeing anything fresh when I can see guys in spandex every month. I mean, I feel like I'm going. It's not even as fun as going to the comic shop when you go to the theater or you go to the toy store. I mean, if I can see the same characters over and over in sequel after sequel, it does get kind of tired. And that's something that the studio executives don't want to talk about, because they fear they're going to lose their job. But as somebody who, again, has studied the entertainment industry, I understand that sometimes you got to shift the gears in order to move things forward. I mean, that's what a visionary does. They understand, okay, I got to shift these gears. Yeah, I was telling that kind of story, but I got to keep taking risks and trying different kind of stories. I got to take risks and try to take on different kinds of challenges. I mean, That's what I was talking about in a video a while back when I said, does a writer's skills, decline with age? And I'm almost 50 years old. And I look at it and go, I need to keep doing different types of stories because I want to keep staying fresh and I want to keep making unique stuff. And I'm not seeing that with your Marvel Studios these days. I'm not seeing it with your DC. Again, Black Adam, great movie, but did well. Everything was on the level as related to the story, but sadly, it lost $50 to $100 million, and it lost $50 to $100 million. One, because the audience is tired of these kind of movies, and two, it costs too much money. And again, these are the same elements that basically led to the end, almost the end of Hollywood. And sadly, because Hollywood today refuses to adapt, they are almost on the brink of their own collapse. And again, because they want to keep making superhero movies, and you've got a lot of comic fans who are working there thinking, oh, I want to keep making superhero movies. And what's sad is that you have to understand that, yeah, you want to make superhero movies. I love superheroes as much as the next guy, but it's time to just, as I see it in 2022, it's time to go out here and try something different, try some different styles of stories. That was one of the things that was great about the 90s. I mean, yes, we had your superhero movies like your Batman Returns and Batman Forever, but we also got Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was basically a comic book come to life. We had Xena Warrior Princess. I mean, we had Hercules: The Legendary Journeys, and these were great shows that gave us fresh takes on the entire superhero style story. And we need that type of risk taking again because right now Hollywood is playing it way too safe, looking for a guarantee, but there's no guarantees in playing it safe. And that's what Black Adam's lesson was. Hollywood thought they were going to get a guaranteed result. They thought they were going to get guaranteed numbers. They thought this movie was going to make $1 billion, but they didn't really look critically at this character. Again, yes, Shazam did well at the box office, but Shazam's budget was smaller than Black Adam's, and your Shazam was a more popular character than Black Adam. Now, Black Adam in a Shazam movie as the villain, that would have been very interesting, but the whole thing is both characters just didn't line up stylistically as related to Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam and your Zachary Levi's Shazam. So when I look at Dwayne Johnson, I don't really see him fitting into a new Shazam movie. But the whole thing is that maybe it's just time for them to understand, okay, it's time to regroup. It's time to take a break from the superhero movies. I think that's what some of these studios need to do and come back 2 or 3 years later, give the audience a bit of a breather. And in that time, give us that comedy, give us that romance, and give us that drama, not the slave movies or the biopics. Give us something unique and fresh from a new screenwriter like myself or a new writer like myself, and really just give us something that makes us look at the world and say, hey, that's really different. Hey, that's unique. And also go out here and advertise some of these movies, because one of the other problems I'm seeing with your Hollywood and even corporate America is they don't advertise their products anymore. I mean, I was looking at the auto industry and they were sitting there saying, oh, we can't sell cars. Well, your cars cost over $100,000, so most people can't find them. And two, you're not making anything cool that you're advertising. The last time I saw a car advertised was NCIS when they had the Dodge Charger and Mark Harmon was driving it. And we don't advertise stuff and let people know, hey, this product is here. Hey, give this product a try. We really need to see you selling your product, because I remember in the 80s when we had Knight Rider, people were buying Trans Ams because they wanted to have a car like Michael Knight, and people were looking for old Dodge Chargers because they wanted to get a car like the Dukes of Hazzard, and they were looking for Ferraris so that they could be like your Miami Vice and your Magnum PI. And nobody's really selling anything unique or special about these characters that make you want to emulate them. So this is a problem I'm seeing with your Hollywood. You're not selling me characters. You're not selling me stories. I mean, yeah, you want to sell me a superhero, but I need something else, to connect with. I mean, this is how Hollywood made money because guys saw cool characters like the Maverick. That's why they went out here in the 80s buying leather bombers. They wanted to be like the Maverick and Indiana Jones. And we're not seeing anything special as related to many of these characters. And it's hurting everything as related to your superhero movies overall. Again, you have to really give me a character that just is exciting and fun. And that's what I believe Hollywood needs. And again, they're wanting to make every comic character into a movie. And I believe it's time to either work with some new characters or go out here and go look for some new stories because right now the superhero movie genre is tired at this point. The audience, I believe, again, is just they're becoming indifferent because when I looked at the trailer for Ant-Meh and the Wasp Quantumania, I wasn't excited because I've seen these visuals a dozen times. Same thing with Black Adam. I've seen these visuals a dozen times, and it just isn't special. And what I want is a break from this stuff. And again, I look at your superhero movies, and I just see a genre of film that is just completely burning the audience out. And you have to, and a good executive understands when the audience is burnt out, they know when to put a period at the end of things. And David Zaslav, I believe, is trying to do that over at Warner Brothers. He understands, look, this is why I got to cancel a lot of these films because if I put these films out and they don't do well, I'm the one who's going to wind up losing a lot of money. So I got to put a period at the end of these films. And once I put the period at the end of these films, what I got to do is go out here and start focusing on rebuilding. And he has to focus on rebuilding. And people, they don't have the patience for this. That's a big problem I'm seeing with your people out here as related to David Zaslav. They want to be critical of him, but the problem I'm seeing with people is they are just looking to go out here and they want instant results, but it doesn't work like that. As related to films, it just doesn't really work like that at all. I mean, you need time to regroup. And as you're regrouping, you have to do what Michael Eisner did, and that is focus on making the studio profitable. And that's what they did as related to films, because with the animated division, he started out slow, working on these low budget live actions, and then working on films like Brave Little Toaster, Great Mouse Detective, and then when Little Mermaid came out in '89, it was a blockbuster. So we really need a visionary to rebuild these studios and get them to start focusing on some diversity of thought because you can't put all your eggs in the superhero movie basket. That's a basket that I believe is breaking as we speak, and it's wearing down. And with it wearing down, the audience is looking for that brand new thing, and it's time to start looking at some different types of concepts and different stories. And sadly, I think these studios are going to go through a lot of pain over the next couple of years because as they keep pushing these, what they call SJW superhero movies with identity politics, they're going to wind up alienating the audience. And it's going to take another visionary like a Wesley Snipes to revive the superhero movie genre once more. Now, I'm going to get ready to wrap up tonight's stream. Before I go, I want to show everybody the SJS Direct 2022 books, which are East Team Horror of the Hyena Woman, Isis Legacy, and John Haynes take at Death's Door, the prose edition. Everybody who got the comic was on the Kickstarter, but this is the prose edition of John Haynes at Death's Door. And you can get all three of these books on Amazon.com right now. So I'm going to leave a link to it in the chat, and you guys can pick up all three of the SJS Direct 2022 books. And these are great gifts for everybody out here. So you can pick up these books right now. Luciano, things that um, yeah, the FIFA video is coming up. And I know how racist they are. So that video is coming up tomorrow, I think, or noon or Sunday at noon. So I'm not going yet, Computer Robots. I'm gonna get ready to go, but you guys can pick up these books, and you can also pick up my vampire novel, Eternal Night. You can find all these books on Amazon.com. They're great gifts for your family and your friends, and they are unique stories that give you a fresh perspective. So there's a lot of great stories out there, and you can try a lot of them at SJS Direct. And if you guys want to help out, you can also help out by donating to the Cash App. That's greatly appreciated. So that also helps me be able to do more streams and more stuff, like different projects. I've got a couple of comic reviews I'm getting ready to do, like the Watchmen, a great comic from Concept Comics. You can get this at concretcomics.com. And I'm going to be doing a review of this comic soon. So I've got a couple of comics that I've gotten from Kickstarters. And again, your donations help me be able to do different things with the channel. I don't know, Computer Robots, if Ollie will go back to Westerns because it's really expensive. And the Westerns, you have to really have a good story. Now, I read a good Western comic called Black Coffins, and that comic is really interesting. It's a great fantasy Western comic. I'm going to do a review of that one. And I believe that they could go do it, but the whole thing is you need good writing, and the foundation of a good movie is the writing. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come to tonight's show. Let's get the likes up before I go. And let's get those likes up. We got 36, got 33, so we got some good likes. So I want to thank everybody for coming out to tonight's stream, and I hope you will be there for next week's stream. Everybody have a great evening, and everybody have a good night.